With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halvorson.
Good morning. Thanks for tuning in to the AgNet News Hour. I am Sabrina Halvorson, joined by Lorrie Boyer this morning again.
And good morning.
All right, we want to talk a little bit about bison today. So there was an interesting story that we saw where Montana, the state of Montana, is suing Yellowstone, the national park, over its bison management plan. And I thought that this was really interesting. First off, because bison management is not something that I think of very often. But then to see that the state is suing the national park because of how they're handling bison, it's an interesting conflict to me because the bison, of course, were here originally, and they were in the Yellowstone National Park area. But, of course, their population diminished, and that was by design many, many years ago. But now the park is trying to increase the number of bison, once again in the park and kind of around the area, because obviously these are, there's no fence that's holding the bison into the national park. So they will roam into other areas. And that is one of the problems that Montana, the state, is seeing with this plan to increase bison, because bison can cause problems in other areas when they're not just sticking to their desired area in Yellowstone. So it's such an interesting conflict, Lorrie, and I thought we should chat about it a little bit.
I liken it to prairie dogs because in Colorado, it's almost the exact type of same issue on this is a national park versus state, but in Colorado, it's usually private land ownership versus municipalities versus the state, all kinds of stuff. But to your point, yeah, they are a naturally occurring animal. And we've talked about this even a little bit at this point with wolf introduction, is it in fantasy, it sounds great. But in reality, especially with the way our society is, the population, the infrastructure, the buildings, all the things around these national parks really have to come into play on this. I think what surprises me more about this is that I know it's not as many as in reality, but a lot of times your news headlines include bison, people in Yellowstone getting too close to them, and then they get hurt. So I was a little surprised that they would want to increase the number of bison for that reason, because as you said, they're not fenced in. And I have covered bison somewhat here as a farm broadcaster. There's a significant amount in Colorado. I know some producers personally. I actually did a TV segment not too long ago here on bison, and they are hard to keep in. These animals are needing major fencing and strong fencing to even try to keep them in. So there would be a big cost to that. But part of the beauty is letting these animals roam around. But the biggest issue, and it's pointed out in an article that you sent me, is the brucellosis. They are known to have brucellosis. Brucellosis is contagious to other bovines, and it causes abortions and causes a lot of sick cows. In Montana, they have a lot of cows and a lot of cattle. I think they have every right to be concerned.
So, and that is a really interesting point. And that's kind of the whole point of this, is that the bison do have this disease that they spread to cattle. And it's a significant, or can be a significant problem for cattle. I love that you brought up, though, that normally when we talk about bison, it's about tourists that are trying to pet the bison. I think we need fewer tourists trying to pet wild animals.
I couldn't agree more.
Don't pet the giant cows. They're mean. They're wild animals, and they are programmed to survive. And if that means eating a human, that's what they'll do. But that's all aside. The problem that the bison can cause, in addition to spreading the disease that I can't pronounce that you just said, they also kind of destroy the vegetation in the area. And that can also lead to lessening or diminishing the biodiversity of vegetation throughout the national park. And that is also a problem as well. Now, again, like we said, the bison were here first, sure. But when we are increasing their populations like that, it's also going to change ecosystems a bit.
I love that I get the chance to point this out because I actually do know about how bison are on the landscape. So their hooves are actually designed to be natural mulchers. So they do work anything that are under them, including vegetation into the soil. Now, some folks, depending on how you're raising them and why you're raising them, will tell you that's a good thing because they naturally um, in enhance, I guess is the word I'm looking for, enhance soil health because they turn over the soil, they work it in. But in this case, what you're speaking to is destruction. And it is destructive. I guess it depends on your perspective. But from the
Mhm.
perspective of what we're talking about today, they are destructive. Those hooves are designed to be destructive, and they are very big, heavy animals. And if you get a herd in one place, again, that could be very destructive to the ecosystem. And if you're a park like Yellowstone, I'm not sure how they manage it. I'm sure they do. But if you are a adjacent landowner in Montana, that would be a problem. I could see where these ranchers or landowners are concerned.
Yeah. So essentially, I need to rent a bison for my garden once or twice a year to work the soil, and then send it back. Yes. No, it's an interesting, jokes aside, it's a very interesting problem. And you know what? When we come back, we'll look a little bit more at why Montana is suing. But we do need to take a quick break. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She's Lorrie Boyer, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. We are talking about bison. So, the plan for Yellowstone that wants to build more of the population of bison can be, there are consequences to that. Now, I see where they're coming from, that they belong on the land, that they do belong in that area, and they do. They are naturally, there. But it is going to cause problems around the area. As we said earlier, they don't just stay in the park. And that's the biggest problem.
So there's the ecological side and the land ownership side that you and I are talking about. But the other side of this whole issue is government overreach. So the national park system is coming in. They've created this plan. This is what they're going to do. And they have not consulted with Montana officials. They haven't gone the route that they are supposed to go in working with local, regional, and state officials to create a plan. And that's another big part of this. And I believe that is actually the reason for the lawsuit is that the state of Montana says, okay, you're increasing these, but you didn't go through proper channels to come up with this mitigation plan or with a mitigation plan in general. And so, again, we're looking at another example of federal overreach. And whether or not, all those things happened or didn't happen, I have to say kudos to Montana for taking a stand because if it can happen here, then it can start happening anywhere and already has in some cases. But I think this is probably a larger picture of some of the micro things that happen when it comes to private property and creating federal plans of land management.
That is such an excellent point, and not one that I had gotten to even, in looking into this. But yes, the idea of the government overreach, which, like you said, when we let it happen in one area, it's going to happen in other areas as well. And that is so important to keep an eye on and to do something about because these rules and systems are set in place for a reason. And the reason is so that when you're making big decisions like this, you can take into consideration how they will affect things outside of your general area. Outside of, for example, in this case, outside of Yellowstone Park, you have to consider how is this going to affect things outside of the national park because it is. It's real easy to say, oh, we're just increasing the population here in the park, but that's not true. You're increasing the population for that entire area.
And what happens when they do start breeding? Again, I liken this to prairie dogs. If they start breeding and start really getting out of control, then who is responsible for handling them? So is it private property rights that those bison would be on? Or is it up to the state? Or is it up to the federal government to either come in and move them or to whatever else they're going to do with them?
Right, right, exactly. How will this be managed from beyond here as well once we do have, the increased population? And right, they are going to continue increasing, right? Unless we manage that.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I'm not sure if these bison will all be tagged and tracked and things like that so that they can keep a gauge on how many bison are actually out there. I would assume so, but I really don't know how that works, and it's really not talked about here. But it just really concerns me. In the article for the Western Livestock Journal is what I'm looking at. The Montana governor, Greg Gianforte, I think that's how you say his name, he
Hmm.
actually has tried to communicate with the National Park Service representatives and said in a quote that he was actually ignored. That's concerning to me.
Hmm. That is concerning, right? Because we simply can't we just can't let that happen. We can't have government agencies that are ignoring governors. My goodness. I mean, I can see maybe if I sent them a letter and they ignore it, from Sabrina Halvorson, right? But this is the governor of a state. You can't just completely disregard what he's saying.
Exactly. Exactly. It's a big deal. And the other thing I just thought of is where we started talking about humans getting too close and petting
Mhm.
wild animals and getting hurt. So if this animal's on private property in Montana and somebody comes to visit or somebody stops over at the side of the road to take photos and they get too close, but they're actually on your property, then who's responsible?
That's a great question. Um, there should be some type of a dumb tourist law
There,
where they're
there's the solution
responsible for
right there.
themselves if they try to pet the giant beasts. If you approach the giant beast, you are responsible for your own consequences. But that law doesn't exist, I don't think so.
No, and actually in eastern Colorado, there is a buffalo. Oh, I'll call it a ranch. I don't think that's really what they call it, but they raise buffalo and then they process them right there in eastern Colorado. And the owner, she had actually told me that several people do stop and take pictures, and especially Native Americans.
Hmm.
They have a strong connection and they really want
Yeah.
to stop and take pictures and really spend time, not necessarily in the pen with them, but they do have proper pennage. Is pennage a word? They do have proper pens built to protect people, but it is a thing. People do stop and they want to look.
Yeah. And I stop. I stay in my car, but I like to stop and take pictures from the safety of my car. And yeah, but I don't know what I would do if I saw one that was just out, like, because I have seen them in national parks, but I don't know what I would do if I have seen one like just in somebody's yard. I don't know. I would not get out and go pet it, that's for sure. All right.
Exactly.
We have to take another quick break. I did enjoy this topic quite a bit, though. It's a very serious one, but a little bit of fun in there as well. So we have to take a break, and then Lorrie will be back. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She is Lorrie Boyer, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Lorrie Boyer.
My guest here today is TJ Bingham. He is a technical agronomist for the Western U.S. with Koch Agronomic Services. TJ, an easy question to start off our conversation here today. Tell me a little bit more about yourself, your background, and your experience. Your background and your experience.
Yeah, so born and raised in Utah, live right on the Utah-Idaho border, and spent the first part of my career in ag retail as a crop advisor for one of the big co-ops in Idaho. And then after that, I had the opportunity to come over to Koch and work for them as a technical agronomist here in the West.
TJ, now that we know more about you, tell me more about Koch Agri Services as a company.
So I work for Koch Agronomic Services, and we are mainly a nutrient use efficiency company. Started with a product that very well known, Agrotane, which is a urease inhibitor for urea, and have slowly, gravitated into more and more products. And one of the most recent launches we just had was phosphorus.
And that leads us into talking about phosphorus. What is it?
So phosphorus is a new product. It's an enzyme. So what it's doing in the soil is it is freeing up organic phosphorus in the soil. A lot of the products on the market today are targeting the inorganic phosphorus, and this product is targeting the organic phosphorus that's tied up in the soil, making it more available to the plants.
Why is it important to target the organic versus non-organic? Give me a little bit of science on that.
I don't know if one's more important than the other. I think what really sets us apart with this product is there's not very many products that are targeting that organic phosphorus. So this will be a a great partner with those other products that are already out on the market, targeting the inorganic side. So we're just targeting a different pool of phosphorus that has not, had much attention put on it.
Should a grower be thinking about targeting both?
Yeah, I think so.
What makes phosphorus different than other products that are in the market that target the organic side?
So phosphorus is very specific in where it targets. So it's targeting the phosphodiesterase. So this is a phosphodiesterase enzyme that's targeting the phosphodiester part of that molecule. And so we're freeing up that, which has been determined to be one of the one of the limiting factors in this freeing up organic phosphorus. So there's kind of two steps to it, and we're targeting that one that we've determined to be the most limiting or the hardest to do.
And when you free up that organic phosphorus, what are the benefits?
Just more plant available phosphate for the plant to get to. Yep.
Do you have any data or any information that you can share with me on specific examples of the benefits or how it's resulted in beneficial crops?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have data dating back to, I think, 2019 as we've worked to develop this product. And we have, for instance, on corn, I think we have 154 different replicated trials that are spread throughout the U.S. And, looking at those, we have an average bushel increase of about 5 bushels per acre when using phosphorus compared to when not using phosphorus.
What are all the crop varieties that you can use it on?
I believe it's labeled on almost all crops. We do have quite a bit of data on different crops, corn being the primary one, but I know that we have some data on some vegetables and some almonds, potatoes, and some of the other specialty crops that you might see in California. And
is it powder or liquid?
It's a liquid formulation. Yeah, so very easily used. We've tested it with a lot of the different, herbicides, fungicides, pesticides that a person may be using in their system, a lot of the fertilizers it can go out with. So it's going to mix very easily with most any application that you're making.
Is there anything else you would like to say about this product?
I think it's just it's a new technology. So it's not really fitting into anything that we've been using so far. It's not a biological, and I know there's a lot of biologicals out on the market, and they've really seemed to be the talking point for a lot of growers and a lot of retailers. And this is an actual enzyme. So really a different category than what we're used to seeing in the ag market. Not saying that there's not enzymes in the agricultural market today. There is, but they're very few and not talked about very, very widely.
Let's just talk in general now for a moment here, unless there was anything else on phosphorus. You being an agronomist, what are some of the things that you're seeing out here in the fields? What are some of the things that are going on in the California fields? What kinds of questions are you getting? Tell me what you're doing right now.
Right now, there's a lot of meetings, conferences have taken place, a lot of just prep for the 2025 season. So we're getting questions on, fertilizer programs, which fertilizers people should be using, how to use those, and stuff like that as people are developing, kind of their programs for the 2025 season.
Do you have a particular format or program that you use to help farmers walk through their decisions to find out what's best or what your recommendations may be for them? Specific situations? We
don't here at Koch Agronomic Services. We're helping more of the retailers, and a lot of the retailers will have those programs that they're using with their growers. So we sit down with the retailers and maybe even the retailer and the grower and work through those. But we're typically using whatever software program or whatever the retailer may have set up for their system.
Okay. As we head here into 2025, now that we're here, what are other things that you would have as far as suggestions or other things that you would like to mention for our grower listeners today?
I think just as you guys are picking, as growers and retailers are picking products to use in the 2025 season, make sure they're coming from reputable companies that have science and data that are backing up the claims that are being made about these products. There's a bunch of products out on the market today, some really good products, some not so good products. So just making sure that they're vetting those out and looking for that science and the data that backs up what the product's actually doing.
TJ Bingham, technical agronomist for the Western U.S. for Koch Agronomic Services, my guest in the first part of the show. I will be back with the second part of the show right after this. The show continues here today. Once again, I'm Lorrie Boyer for AgNet West, and I am now visiting with Robert Shaffer, who is the co-chair of the 2025 Commodity Classic. The Commodity Classic this year will be held at the Denver Convention Center in downtown Denver. And Robert, what are the dates?
March 2nd through March 4th. It's a little different this year. Typically, we are a Thursday through Saturday show, but because we've gotten not that we're a huge show, but we've definitely grown a lot since 1996, which was the very first one. We're coming up on the 30th anniversary. Not this is the 29th. Next year will be the 30th. We have to plan out basically 10 years in advance. There's only basically 7 warm weather places we can go. Okay, so most of our attendance is from Canada to Kentucky. Okay, basically so those people don't want to go somewhere cold. Typically, they want to go somewhere warm. Okay, so that's why San Antonio, Orlando, Houston last year. New Orleans is a usual fit, but because of the fact that they wanted to do something different, like Houston was the first time we ever did it was last year, to try something new. This year's and Denver, in 26 and 25 will be brand new as well. Plus some of the convention places are adding on, like San Antonio. That one is adding on even more square footage because we've basically outgrown the footprint there. And the other thing is, another interesting is we need 65 to 7,000 hotel rooms within a certain radius on the peak nights. Okay, so not only is it the convention center size, it's also the amount of rooms that we need for the attendees, whether that's the farmer leaders coming, the farmers that have to do resolutions and do their association stuff, the farmers that are coming there to learn, national yield contest winners, okay, national corn, the people that win wheat and corn and contests that get to come as well. So there's a lot of things you don't think about, okay, not to mention industry employees that are working the booths and doing the educational sessions and that kind of stuff, that we don't think about. That you're like, oh my gosh. And you think, and then you're like, I think last year we were 600,000 square feet. This year we're right like 575,000 square feet on the main trade show floor, which that's something different this year. We're going back to just one floor, where last year, Houston, we were on 2 separate floors, which we were really worried about trying to how we drive traffic to the 3rd floor versus the 1st floor. And it seemed to work out a lot better than we thought, this will be nice because it's just going to be 1 floor. So as far as the trade show goes, so.
I had no idea you needed that many hotel rooms. Wow.
Yeah, it's a massive undertaking. We have great staff, both on the corn side and the bean side, and we have a show director who's phenomenal. Okay, and she majored in this stuff. Kind of. I didn't know there was a major for this kind of thing. Like I said, I got an ag business degree. I didn't think about any of this stuff besides going to a trade show. So,
Roger, last year was record-breaking attendance.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Last year was record-breaking attendance. We're right around 30,000, just under.
So we go by farmer leaders. Okay, so we broke 10,600. I want to say on the farmer side, which was a record by 500 people. Okay, farmers go counting industry and all that stuff. Yeah, that 30,000 mark. The big thing is we were really worried. We're a tad bit worried, but we're optimistic from this standpoint. The ag economy is kind of not very good right now, but the trade show booth sales floor took 3 days to sell out the whole floor. Okay, how that works is the people that were there last year get first dibs. Okay, based on how big their booths are. Okay, and the good news is that everybody basically we had a 95% return rate. So there was only 5% left for the people that wanted to be there new. We always have a waiting list. Okay, of people that want to come and just exhibit. Okay, on the trade show floor, and we have to turn. There's quite a few we have to turn away because we don't have enough square footage. Which that was great this year that we get to add new companies to it because that's the lifeblood of any trade show we love our old John Deeres and the Cortevas, Bears, Case IH, Fent. We love those folks. Okay. But we also, we try to extend an olive branch to all the new people because you never know, when they're going to be, eventually be big too. So,
Roger, as far as educational aspects and presentations that will be there in March of 2025, can you highlight a few of those for us?
We spent a lot of time, and that was the thing I didn't appreciate when I first started going to Classic. So I went because I was on the officer team in Illinois Soy, and I went because I had to do resolutions, and I love a trade show. I love a trade show and I love trinkets. Okay. I am a huge trinket fan. Okay. I love Yeti, but cups, hats, that kind of stuff. I'm not a pen and pencil person anymore. Okay. But I love a trinket. And so what I've learned is we put on a lot of what we call early riser sessions. It's an investment in your farm. Okay. We put on educational sessions, whether it's new technology, drones, taxes, software things. Okay. Where you can go and learn what's new, what's coming, biologicals, all the new stuff coming down the pike. Okay. And you get to pick and choose where you go. Okay. And you can customize it to your operation. And the return on investment that we're hearing from people, because we do surveys at the end. What did you like? What can we change? Was the room too hot? Was it too small? Could you hear? All that kind of stuff, and trying to get feedback on how to change it for next year. Because the farmers pick. So this is a farmer-focused, farmer-led trade show. Okay. And we have companies apply to us for topics. Okay. And in their presentation or their project description, they list everything out. And then we pick and choose the ones that we think are going to be beneficial to wheat farmers, corn farmers, bean farmers, and sorghum farmers.
Once again, my guest here today on the second part of the show has been Robert Shaffer. He is the 2025 Commodity Classic co-chair. For more information on the upcoming event, you can log on to commodityclassic.com. The 2025 Commodity Classic runs March 2nd through the 4th at the Colorado Convention Center in downtown Denver. Stay tuned. Sabrina Halvorson is coming up next.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
For this segment, we're going to check in with the USDA and talk about some programs going on there to ensure our food systems remain intact. We're talking with Jenny Lester Moffett, who is the Undersecretary for Marketing and Regulatory Programs at USDA. Thanks for joining us this morning, Jenny. Let's talk a little bit about USDA and supply chain for food and agriculture and some of the programs involved.
Yeah, absolutely, Sabrina. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to talk about the work that we're doing, building a stronger and more resilient food system so that consumers and farmers have more choices in the marketplace, which I think is really important in the light of just all of the different things that are going on, but certainly food supply chain disruptions that we've experienced over the past several years.
The COVID-19 pandemic kind of brought our supply chain issues really to light. And we saw new issues that we had not had before too. Was there some learning there that has been, built upon since then?
Absolutely. Those disruptions, I think they just really build a critical need for a change and a new approach to America's food system. Early on in the Biden-Harris administration, Congress passed the American Rescue Plan. And with that, they invested $4 billion in USDA to transform the food system. And the first thing that we did was we listened. We listened to folks throughout the food supply chain of what is needed. How can we invest this one-time dollar influx in a way that really truly transforms and builds a more resilient supply chain throughout our food supply chain. So we invested in things like regional food business centers, which provide direct technical assistance for small and mid-sized farm businesses to be able to get better access to local and regional supply chains. But we also invested in infrastructure, whether that is meat and poultry processing plants to food hubs and local food distribution infrastructure to organic and other processing as well. We really looked across the spectrum and said we have a variety and a very diverse food system, and these investments really need to be to meet the needs of producers across the countries as well as consumers as well. So really investing in that infrastructure was a critical part. But then we also knew that we needed to, at the same time, ensure a fair and competitive playing field for producers. And that is where the work that we've been doing, increasing competition in agriculture, has been a really important part of that as well.
We have heard people say quite often, that food security is national security, and it's true. The nation's food supply is vital to our existence. And so when we're talking about protecting things like the supply chain or improving things like the supply chain, what kind of an impact can that have?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And back in the 1970s, there was a Secretary of Agriculture at that time who really hearkened on that. Earl Butz talked about how food security is national security, and we needed to grow fence row to fence row and to really increase what we are producing so that we had that national security. Um, One of the results of that, though, was really more consolidation and bigger businesses, agribusinesses. And so what we realized is that some of the smaller family farmers and the family food processing operations really got left behind. So what we've been doing is we've been very purposeful in investing in that, investing in small and mid-sized operations, investing family farmers who can then grow their businesses, see opportunity for the next generation to come back or for new generations to come into agriculture. Um, they're providing well-paying jobs in rural regions, building partnerships with their schools or hospitals or food banks or other market opportunities. This is really about investing in where the food system starts with America's farmers and ranchers, who are the backbone of our food supply chain.
You kind of mentioned it here and then also just a few moments ago as well, but with increasing competitiveness in some aspects of agriculture as well, that's also been a focus during this administration. Like you just mentioned, with getting some of these smaller facilities more competitive with the larger facilities that we've seen for so many years. Do you see that, that effort? Are we seeing some of that come to fruition more?
We are absolutely. We see that in things like our investment in meat and poultry processing. We've been investing in infrastructure, the brick and mortar meat and poultry processing facilities, in distribution of meat and poultry processing. But then we also know that through the work that we've been doing on updating our packers and stockyards rules so that farmers have and the market policies are really there to support farmers and ranchers, that they have opportunity to be able to sell into retail channels that they might not have been able to sell into before. So really across the spectrum, we're seeing that. I think, what's really neat is a while ago, I was able to, on one of my trips to Michigan, I visited Eastern Market in Detroit. And I would imagine a lot of your listeners have been there. And what I think is really unique about Eastern Market is, of course, the robust market, which is great. It makes sure that people are able to have a place where they're able to really drive their food dollar exactly to family farmers. But they're also partnering with 20 organizations in the metro area to make sure that they're providing food directly to food insecure families as well. So they're at Eastern Market, it's the marketplace itself. There's also actually food incubators and kitchens that are building and strengthening food businesses from the beginning. But then also, they're really doing an important piece of the food security and making sure that those who are food insecure have nutrient dense, locally grown produce available to them through food boxes and through other programs.
We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next segment. We do need to take a quick break. We're talking this morning with Jenny Lester Moffett, who is the Undersecretary for Marketing and Regulatory Programs at USDA. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. This is the AgNet News Hour, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. We're talking this morning with Jenny Lester Moffett, who is the Undersecretary for Marketing and Regulatory Programs at USDA, and we're talking about our food supply chain and how we keep American agriculture running. So for our listeners who are not necessarily in agriculture, but obviously, they eat, they wear clothes, they put gas in the car, what are some ways that they're really seeing the benefits from these efforts by USDA?
Well, I think that folks are seeing the benefits of the efforts through things like being able to have more and better access to fresh, healthy food and food products. There's more diversity in places that we can go to get food. people that are relying on emergency food banks or their critical meals at schools are getting more fruits, vegetables, nuts, as well as geographically and culturally specific food options as well. So I think what we're seeing is just more access to products that are grown in the region, that are produced in the region. And then also, I think, and what's really special is building community connectivity and engagement around food and farming. When we go to markets, when we are connecting directly with our food producers, we get to learn more about how that food is grown, why it's grown, and the family and the community behind where that food is grown.
And that's such a neat story too, when we get to see, like you said, the family and the community behind all of the where our food comes from. I think is so helpful in connecting people with the agriculture just in general. And we've seen kind of a lot of that throughout the Biden-Harris administration with a focus on the family farms and the smaller operations around the nation too. Any idea why that was such a focus for them?
I think it shows. Well, I will say, as someone who was born and raised on my family's farming operation, I worked with my dad in our farming operation. There is nothing more special than being able to grow food, to raise food, and then to be able to meet the people who are enjoying the food that you're raising. I mean, that is just such an incredible opportunity to be able to do that. And so I think as a farmer myself, that is a really big driver is to really be able to have that connectivity, to be able to not just take pride in what I grow, but then also be able to see the people who've enjoyed it. And I've seen that as I've traveled the country. We have a program, the Local Food Purchase Assistance, where we are buying local food that is produced by local farmers and ranchers and distributing that into food banks. And I was meeting with some farmers and they said, I grow my food and I get it into, really great value chains through restaurants and retails. And he said, but one time I was dropping off my apples at the food bank and someone came up to me and said, wow, I have never had such great looking fresh produce before. And that is thanks to you being able to sell here to this food bank. And I think that pride, and not just what we're growing, but who's able to now eat the food that we're growing, I think has just really been transformative and the reason why I do the work that I do.
Those are all of the questions that I had, but is there anything else that you'd like for our listeners to know?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key thing is folks can always go online to learn more about the work that we're doing at USDA. We have a webpage, usda.gov/markets, where folks can learn more about USDA and the work that we're doing, building a stronger and more resilient food system.
Thank you to Jenny Lester Moffitt, the Undersecretary for Marketing and Regulatory Programs at USDA, for joining us this morning. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. On behalf of Lorrie Boyer and myself, thank you for starting your morning with us.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Also look for Sabrina Halvorson on Facebook and be sure to subscribe to our podcast by searching for AgNet West on your podcast app. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.